All right, ladies and gentlemen, happy Friday to us. Probably Saturday to you if you listen on Saturday. Kale here. This is Acquire and Operate. We're buying, growing small micro SaaS companies. What does that mean? SaaS companies doing 500K to 1.5 million. We've got one company in our portfolio, and we are here to wrap on year one. We're going to wrap on Q124, which is this is a fun thing, but the ownership period, our holding period started in March, so kind of the tail end of Q1. So we are running on a little bit of a funky calendar. So Q1 of this year was actually our fourth quarter holding the business. So we're going to wrap on that, and then we're going to, I guess, abstract out and wrap on year one. And damn, what's up, Kev? This is a wild exercise, huh?
It was, talk about a wild exercise. It felt like we were back in like the grind days of like the new entrepreneurship, and you have this baby and you're just so happy to see it grow. And it's like, oh man, you have to watch out for, ooh, don't touch that corner. Ooh, don't hurt your hand. That's what it felt like. But you know what? Year one, I'm happy to say I'm proud of our performance, man. We did that. We got our baby to year one.
Yeah, oh gosh, this is such an interesting, just like psychological exercise, right? Because you want to like never satisfied is kind of an interesting mantra,
Yeah.
but at the same time, that's not super healthy. Like, I think you want to pat yourself on the back every once in a while.
Celebrate your small wins.
And I think coming into this, I was like, it wasn't like growth wasn't extraordinary, and we're growth people, And
Yeah.
so
With lofty goals. We always like to set lofty goals for ourselves.
And I was like, growth wasn't really unremarkable. And then when I really took stock of everything we did, and then just reminded myself of the context that, like, yeah, dude, this is not a one acquisition, grow it as hard as possible in Y1 exercise. This is a build the engine that is Scaling Ventures and make this repeatable and go prove that we can chop it up and validate a lot of assumptions about micro SaaS, about our operating model, about a whole shitload of shit. So anyway,
massive learning opportunity.
Yeah, I walked away from it being like, all right, Kale, you get like a limp, but it's a high five, but it's pretty limp.
It's not the participation trophy. This one's got your name on it.
Yeah, this isn't like the Top Gun. Wacha, like you crushed it, buddy. All right, well let's jump in and we'll get some notes going here. So
yeah,
so typical structure for us, Abby, is, or I guess table of contents, not so Abby. So we always kind of, it's like a look back, look forward. So Q124, we're going to have a reflection and diagnosis. We'll talk through our main achievements, key learning, and then we'll dig into the numbers with some charts. We'll look at MRR, active users, and revenue. We'll look at core performance metrics like traffic, trial signups, churn, all that good stuff. We'll talk about our OKRs and how we felt we executed there. And then we'll turn the purview forward towards Q224, which is the first quarter of Y2. And then we'll zoom out and we'll look at Y1. And again, man, just even looking, I don't want to get us too off track here, but like just even looking in Notion and looking at our wrap notes from sprint 1 to sprint 2, I was like, the growth, I can't state how much growth has occurred. For me personally, it's just like, holy shit, I am a complete, and like Hormozy says, like, you don't do the work works, or you don't work on the work works on you. And I'm like, I am a different human at the end of this year. So, and that's what we came for. More important than anything.
We're strategic planning ninjas now. Like,
it's just like, so Y1 is basically the same rhythm, a reflection and diagnosis, main achievements, key learning. We'll talk about Y1 goal execution, and then we'll talk about our Y2 goals. Gucci gang?
Gucci gang.
All right. Main achievements. What do you think is our number one achievement in Q124, the fourth quarter of our holding period?
The fourth quarter of our holding period, I will say, with the entire look back, I know it's already there as the bullet number one, but just overall with revenue, users, all together, we've kept the business pretty stable. Slight growth, but we've at least kept the business pretty stable where it doesn't like go totally under, because that is really the biggest fear of any acquisition. Is this going to go well? Can we keep it steady state? And you definitely don't want to hit worst case scenario.
Totally. And that's back to like, what is the spectrum of outcomes here?
Yep.
And we're like, hey, like steady state. And I think it's really important for us to talk about like revenue quality, because the quality of the revenue for the business is extraordinarily better. But I'm like, the worst case is everybody churns and the business is insolvent and I go bankrupt.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know?
Like day one, we were like, oh, what if all the customers just went with the last guy because he was so hands-on with them? We were like, oh man, that is a risk. Like,
Totally.
you know?
And this it's all that kind of first rodeo fear. So I'm with you. I think it's like, and when we say stable at 20K MRR, I mean there was so much that was involved in that, where there was the migration of the billing system. And when I say quality revenue, I mean standardized pricing, right? So it's not all this grandfathered pricing, all this variance in the plans, sweetheart kind of a la carte pricing, which creates all kinds of operational complexity because it's like, this feature, they don't have access to this. Well, what plan are they on? Well, oh, bing, bing, bing. And it's just a drag on the business. And there was a lot of just kind of random lumps of monthly subscriptions. So it's like, hey, you want to buy 6 months? You want to buy 10 months? And it's like, that's tough to say
Yeah.
that that's recurring. That's kind of like bulk purchases. So we get to the other side, and all of that was a drag on MRR revenue into the business on a monthly basis, which is cash to breathe, cash to grow. So now, I look and I'm closing the books each month and I'm like, bang, just consistent revenue. Boom, 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 month over month. No lifetime plans. I mean, I think a ton, and that's another thing. Please, God, only sell lifetime plans if you're getting going or if you are in the worst pinch ever, because it's just
Yeah.
not SaaS. So we got back to, we were in striking distance of a growth goal without utilizing annual plans, stuff like that the prior owner had done. So, and even if we had measured that, right, if I had adjusted down revenue in 2022, the calendar year before we took ownership, it should have been a 10 or 15% haircut because it was lifetime plans. So anyway, stable at 20K, the revenue quality is dialed, and we've got positive trend lines. I guess let's unpack the 20K MRR. We've got positive trend lines across MRR, revenue, and user growth.
Yep.
Right. And we haven't really fixated on growth yet. We did like the basic always on stuff that is just like, hey, let's make better use of what's happening. So
Yeah,
another
let's
one,
improve the product a little bit. And that was really it. But yeah, I think if we had pulled that growth lever sooner, probably would have seen a lot more traction here.
totally. And then the first I should probably zip this up a little bit, but it's like the first substantive product release has been very well received. So I think some signals for me that got me really jazzed is we work with some third party like implementers, and they're like, Kale, everybody's buzzing about the portfolio company. Everybody, like, there is a buzz about all the stuff you're releasing, the velocity of releases, just how
That's
thoughtful
what
the
you want to
product
hear.
stuff is. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Because, and that's been, I think, my mental maturity, my emotional maturity has significantly grown, because I'm just so, I used to be, in the sales and marketing capacity, where a lot of times you're pushing back on the market really hard. You're like, if you're thinking this Mr. or Mrs. prospect, you're not a fit for us. Once the customer comes in, retention is just the name of the game. And to a degree, the customer is always right, but there's just always this fear that any changes, and you have to do what's in the interest of growing the business, right? Like, you have to act and behave more in alignment with prospective users, because that's where the growth comes from. But churn is oxygen, or retention is oxygen, I should say. So I
Retention is
think we've
oxygen.
ripped the product release. We've now got the product in a much more modern place. And the users love it, didn't churn. And I think this was our first kind of like actually predictable, solid engineering velocity release. And when I was looking at the deal, a lot of my peer group were like, there's too much technical debt. This can't be done. So I get to the end of it, and we've actually managed to change the risk profile of the entire business, because it's like, oh, that thing that totally crushed value, we fixed it. Right. So that's a huge win for us. We'll keep it moving.
100%.
So 1X fully scalable acquisition channel locked and loaded. So we've got line of sight on 400,000 deeply enrichable leads, and we've got this automation and generative AI based outbound sequence that is, I guess, the operating model, which holy shit, that's got a lot of potential. So I'm really, really jazzed about that. And that's obviously been, pretty much purely your lane. Anything to add there, Kev?
Yeah, so I would say just overall, the true feeling is year one was truly focused around building that operating model and finding what are those value levers we can pull just to keep the business steady state and find certain pops of growth. This year, we're leaning in on growth heavy. And I'm very excited for the results, because a lot of the tools that we're using beyond just traditional tactics, including generative AI and potentially even paid retargeting ads behind all of that. There's just so many levers that we can now try that I'm just excited about the learning aspect. So new learning opportunities in different shapes. Let's say that.
I love it. And then early signs of ROI on our content and audience effort. So when I looked at, and we'll dig into that hard, but we just went super hard at content and
Oh
distribution,
yeah,
repurposing. And that's obviously in today's world, a huge point of operating leverage with generative AI and some different things. And obviously you got to be super thoughtful of quality there, but we're starting to see a real boost in traffic. We're ranking with all kinds of keywords, and that stuff is all really, really high leverage. But early days. And I guess the thing
yeah,
there is that those efforts do compound over time, right? Like you're kind of creating gravity on the internet, and it gets heavier and heavier and heavier over time. So I'm looking for kind of non-linear improvement there.
100%. And one thing I would add there for the audience, one learning lesson that we recently learned is as you're going through your SEO strategy, just always double check. The search engines are indexing all of your pages.
Yeah.
Always follow the data.
Yeah, dear God. And that's back to just measuring results, right? Like if you don't have a system of record to measure results, you're flying blind. Might as well not do it. You can only improve what you measure.
Exactly.
All right, key learning. So, I mean, my big one, and this is a wordy one, but I'm like, I guess here's a scenario. Okay, let's rebrand the business. Let's fix the website. Let's put a ton of energy into onboarding. And then let's start to hit top of funnel. And it's like, well, you could just hit top of funnel and see what happens. What's the cost in the resource allocation required to get you there? Well, it's X for the website and the rebrand. It's X for onboarding and in-app queues and bing, bing, bing. And it's like, all right, what's it for cold outbound? It's like, well, we got to just, at worst case, buy leads and kit out with some tooling. So it's like,
And
well, why don't you?
make sure the outreach is personalized and we
And
can
it's
track
like,
it.
well, why don't you just drive? And then I think where I was always at is like, you don't want to drive users towards a shitty funnel. Meaning
That's how we were trained in sales and marketing.
yeah, because there's an opportunity cost and the TAM is finite, and you don't want to
Exactly.
churn or burn through the market with something that's non-stellar. It's like get things dialed and then push them through a smoother, slipperier funnel. And
You
I
have
think I
one
look
chance at
back
a
on
real first impression there. Yeah.
yeah, and it's back to like okay, and we're in Micro SaaS, so you need to be even more thoughtful. Like we're going after small markets, but the short term memory. It's like, I don't remember who sent me a cold email yesterday.
Yeah. You're getting so many.
Yeah. And it's like, I think we're like, they trial it and then, you can come back with a new message as you release product and you improve the platform and stuff like that. But I'm just like, it's like, hey, what happens if what kind of new users will we generate if we drive qualified stuff to the funnel? That's
And
a
what would they
question
say about the product? The onboarding that we have critical feedback around, how will they react to it? And is it as critical for them?
Oh, and we need to harvest data, right? Because even if you improve the onboarding experience, if you don't have enough throughput, you can't tell if what you're doing is working. So it's
Exactly.
back to like, I think the first order of business on a go forward is like, let's drive a shitload of traffic to the top of funnel and see what happens. And then it's back to like, what do your growth goals look like? Like how big do you, and for us, I think generally it's like, we need to 2X the business in 2 years. And that generates insane IRRs. And then if we, kind of move towards an exit or we just capture income and pay distributions from there. But I'm very much of the point of view now where it's like, yes, drive a ton of traffic to the top of the funnel. You'll, at worst case, harvest a ton of really interesting data that'll allow you to be smarter with the onboarding later on. You can validate the
Yep.
pain points, the jobs to be done. You can validate your core customer segments, etc. And, I guess the awareness isn't terrible. And then go from there. So anyway, I think order of operations, it's like, what's like, if you have questions in your mind, and I'm not really sure how I want to articulate this, but it's like, if you don't know, test it or test the cheapest thing first, right? Is probably the summary. And it's like, hey, let's do this thing that's cheap as hell. There's a ton of external benefits or externalities that we'll gain from it. And then let's go from there. So that's definitely my posture moving forward. We had some room to be more data driven, and it's data driven is a practice, right? Like there's always room to be more data driven, but on the roadmap exercise in particular, we looked at current product usage, but it wasn't like a designated step where it's like, let's get the roadmap to this place. And then let's, as a team, look at usage and validate the sequencing, validate the level of priority. Like when we use the RICE framework, we think about impact, and it was very much like new users, future users, different customer segments. But I think we could have been more data driven on a relative basis and be like, lead forms get way more traffic, but client portals are underutilized because the UI is so terrible. And then it's like, okay, then you have to think through that, right? Is the effort here to drive adoption in new places, or is it to improve the stuff that everybody's using? And you have to put that on some kind of scale and make decisions around it. So I think we
Yeah.
missed there. And
And
then the
I
other,
would even add to that to even validate some of the assumptions. We started when we first acquired the company, we started doing user surveys, and then we kind of got away from that. So I think, like, to your client portal example, that was a good opportunity for us to then target the users who we do see using client portal, or the ones who show characteristics as though they should be using it, but they're not. And then let's talk to those two segments to understand their whole perspective and approach to that client portal. And that could have validated a lot of assumptions for us.
yep, yep. And then our objectives still contain too many KRs. Um,
We keep
yeah,
trying to do too much.
well, and we're just too task oriented, and that's totally me, because I'm like, everything needs to be repeatable. We need a clear order of operations. We need to turn this into a playbook. It's like, dude, just fixate on the results and let the team run. And I think the kind of mantra here is that you learn about the work by doing the work. So
That is a very good point. I think there's a healthy balance there, though, because one, we still need it to be task oriented to one level as we measure things against the right framework. You still have to kind of map out what are the activities to understand the true impact and reach here. But at the same time, is where can we find that flow? Maybe that's the conversation. So at what point can the team just flow and then come back with the learning lessons? And now we start to build the model out of the lessons.
yeah, and I think that's like, here were the key results, and here's how we got there in the context of the tooling that we had available. And then we
Mm-hmm.
operationalize that and playbook it, right? And so it's
Yep.
like, and providing tons of flexibility. So it's a fixation on results over inputs and process. You want to provide as
Yeah.
much flexibility as humanly possible to achieving the results. And you want to be very clear. And I studied OKR so much this year. And I was like, why are there only 3 or 5 key results? And it's like, because you just fixate on the 3 most important things that get you to the objective, and then let the team run. So that was a big kind of leadership, organizational design kind of lesson for me. The
Well said.
last few that we'll kind of bang through quickly. Release calendars need more slack. So this has always been something that bugged me, where it's like, it's on the roadmap, and it's like, okay,
Doesn't
like,
do anything for me.
that's like, that doesn't mean shit. And it's like, when is the next release? What's on the next release? Is the product roadmap documented? Do you socialize it with users? No. And it's like, okay. And then users get smart to that, and they're like, all right, that means nothing. So I wanted to be
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of, again, back to like actually building the firm in public, like being very accountable. Like, these are the release dates. This is what is going to be released. And we need more slack there. So we started with like 10 days, basically, where it was like, our internal due date for this release item is X. We're going to socialize with clients that it's X plus 10. And now, and it was really like, it was kind of 7 to 10. So I think now it's kind of under promise,
Under promise.
over deliver, right? So I think we want to stretch that out to 4 weeks, where it's like, we've got stuff released, or we're socializing stuff on the premise that it's X plus 31. And if we can release early, happy days, and the user base is totally aware of what's coming. And as a quick, and again, this is back to, I guess, just trying to, split the atom and get very simple. I was like, tech debt. Yeah. Okay. There's weird shit in the code. What does that mean? And it's like, it means drag. So that's how I interpret it now. It means when there's tech debt, it is a straight up drag on engineering speed and release predictability. So, when you're building net new, it's like, yes, we're going to create this thing. I have a really tight estimate as to how many hours it's going to take to engineer it. When you're dealing with tech debt, it's like, I don't know, man. It's like,
Yeah.
happy days. I'm on this thing. I think it's going to take a couple of weeks, and then I step on a huge landmine, and now it's 2 months. And it's like, oh my God. And when you're trying to manage a budget
Yep.
against that, it just makes, it's like fighting a cloud. You have no idea what the hell's going on. So tech debt is super real. And I think this is on our Y1 thing, where you need to understand tech debt on a relative basis. And the good news is, with our portfolio company, now we have a thing to put on the spectrum to understand other opportunities relatively. So I think that's a blessing in disguise.
Yep. Nope. Totally agree.
All right, by the numbers. Okay, so, and again, we still have, like, there's still a slight delta between our back end, which consolidates all billing systems, and what's piped into our analytics, which is a function of Stripe, and we use DataBox. So there's a slight delta, but it used to be a huge delta because there were all these pricing plans and people were getting billed here and billed there, and it was a disaster. So when we look at it, I'm just going to look, here. So we've got, and I would just take this for a grain of salt. So we're just going to look at this quickly because it's not the best representation of MRR. Like you can see November is when we adjusted the pricing plans, and then it looks optically like a huge jump in MRR, but that's not accurate. That was a huge jump towards Stripe and normalized pricing plans. And then so generally, but I mean, I think the good news is once things normalized after that, we're buzzing. You can see here that it's a very stable and somewhat net positive look there. And then net new MRR, again, this was a function of the pricing and annual plans. There was a huge jump. And now we're starting to see, how that's buzzing. And then you see active users, our customers, which is somewhat influenced by the transitionary stuff that I've already touched on a million times, but we're also starting to see net new organic growth, which is great. And then we look at some other stuff. So ARR 231, boom. ARR per FTE, which is a metric that I'm really fixated on because I think it speaks to the kind of the root of why Micro SaaS is a very attractive asset class. So we're doing 75 or 74.5K ARR per FTE. Right now we have 3.1 FTEs. And I guess what does that mean, right? Full-time equivalent, which is usually 160 hours per month is the definition of a full-time equivalent. So we add up all the contractor, freelancer peeps working on it. We're there and we're punching, Kyle Poirier just released a bunch of benchmarks for venture-backed private companies. And we're right on the cusp of punching like a $1 to $5 million SaaS business. So from an ARR per FTE perspective, we're punching like the business is 5 times bigger. And then where that gets really interesting is when we transition to steady state. And at that point, we'll be generating more EBITDA per FTE than like a $25 million ARR business. So that's where I start to get super jazzed. And then, that's really it there. Okay. So if we look at MRR on an adjusted basis, here's where kind of the story comes to life. So black is prior to our ownership, green is our ownership. And you can see the business was generally in structural decline. At a slight, and you could kind of consider this a turnaround, right? So revenue, and then you have orange is Q4 for us, which was Q1 on a regular calendar. So, I mean, if we look here, it's like, generally speaking, since we bought the business, things are up and to the right. Most recently, and this is a function of the pricing refresh. So I guess all to say we have positive momentum on the revenue side, which was a function of being more commercially savvy with the users that we already have, AKA pricing and monetization, and then solving for retention and starting to get some net new organic user growth. MRR looks like a slight structural decline on a trailing 24 month. It's a little more, that's trailing 24 months. But if we look again here in the purview, if we just look at the last 30 days, it's like, okay, MRR is starting to move up and to the right, but this is a function of net new users. And that's the stuff that, because of all the transformation activities, because this is patient zero, and we're not only building infrastructure for this business, we're building infrastructure that's repeatable for the firm. You start to realize like, okay, Y2 is all about getting MRR going. And we probably should have been more thoughtful about the duration of that transformation period to then establish a timeline for our growth goals or adjust our growth goals based on that timeline accordingly. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you there. That's why I'm very excited to pull that growth lever this year, because this was the perfect experiment where we can now look back 1 year and say, okay, we focused on transformation and there was slight organic growth, but now that we're actually being thoughtful about user acquisition, I think we're going to be very excited with the results.
No doubt. All right, so now moving on to core performance metrics, let's step in. There's some stuff that's just like, God damn it. Like, our trial to paid on the is 17%. So I'm super focused on getting onboarding absolutely dialed and making it product native and kind of doing those things in parallel. So getting cold outbound going, building awareness, building a kind of universe of warm, trusting leads, and then really being intentional about the call to action and driving them towards, trial periods. But again, if we zoom in and I guess I can't zoom in too much, but all right. So if you look here and I talk about seasonality, so there's like this culture of like Black Friday in our category where there's all this steeply discounted stuff and people buy stuff. And then like, so you can kind of think, okay, all these Black Friday things happen. And so for us, it was like, okay, these things kind of spike, and then people actually like look at stuff. There's a buzz in the market. They sign up for things and try things out in January when their business is quiet. And so there's a seasonality around purchasing behavior. And then there's a seasonality around the busyness and the volume of business that our users do. And when January comes around, things slow down for them. It's very much kind of a wedding season type business. So here, and I'm like, all right, so we don't want to think too much about the seasonality when we look at new visitor traffic, and we probably want to try to adjust for that for trial signups. And then, what does that mean for new paying users, and for churn too, right? So it was like, oh man, we saw a huge spike in churn in February where we churned 12 users, and that was purely a function of people moving on to new things because they're quiet and maybe they've been waiting to do that. Maybe they're taking advantage of some discounting and stuff like that occurred in like the November, December time period. But all to say, if we're looking at a trailing last quarter, it's like, oh boy, we've got, and I detail this, but I think it's like a 4% month over month rate of improvement with site traffic. And then trial signups is like a 10% month over month improvement. And then new paying users are starting to really pop. So this is probably, and then we tie that to inputs, right? Or I guess just to kind of keep it going. So a lot of green here, 25% more site traffic, 13% more trial signups. Our visitor to trial is going down, but that's a function of more traffic to the page, right? So you got to be careful about being too hard on that. You're kind of changing the denominator. Our trial to paid conversion is absolutely exploding. And our trailing 12 month is 4%, which is dog poo. You want to be doing 20% is kind of best, or is median performance there in terms of benchmark comparables. So now we were at 13% before, which was like a 2.5 improvement. And now we're floating right on the cusp of 20%. And we haven't touched onboarding. Or we unwound all the terrible work we did on onboarding. So this is purely a function of driving higher quality traffic to the website and then we'll step in and we'll look at like kind of, okay, what is driving traffic? So I think all good signs here. And then you look at churn, and this is the craziest thing. Churn, we made churn is better. So, I mean, 10% annual churn in SMB SaaS is insanity. Like 20% is kind of the base rate that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So this is
half at that. Yeah.
Absolutely elite. It's sub 1% on a trailing 12 month. So it's just extraordinary. And that's a function of the centralized systems, streamlining support infrastructure, getting good surface area across all the customer touch points, et cetera, documenting the entire knowledge base and refreshing that so users can help themselves. So we've got some cool stuff coming. And then actually, this reminds me, I had one note too for today that I just want to make sure I touch on.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. We've kept the business pretty stable with slight growth. Again, still very excited about what we've done in year one as we really focused on transformation. And I think, moving into pulling that growth lever now, we'll really get into that trial to paid conversion. I mean, the product release with the onboarding is now just so beautiful. It's how is it deniable? Let's dive in there. How is it deniable?
Yeah, well, I think if we get to a place, and it's so like if you can't explain it to a 2-year-old, you're missing. So I'm like, if I'm going to explain it to my son, who would never understand this ever because he's literally 2 years old, but I'd be like, we're going to get more people to look at it and make it easier for them to start paying us or like see the value. It's as simple as that, right?
Literally, that's it. Let's get higher quality traffic at top of the funnel and then make it super easy for them to get to the first point of value that they want.
Boom. And it's just like, show them why it's awesome immediately and then ask them to pay you. Yeah, that's it. Get them into the store, show them something that solves their pain point as fast as humanly possible, and then ask them to pay. It's like, oh, cool, great, got it. All right, so now we look at here, and then this is where we start to see really kind of all grain. So we made a big commitment to, and we established our content and audience operating system. So we stuck our trial signups goal, we stuck our new visitor sessions goal, though the gold thing for some reason didn't show in DataBox. The funnel has improved, decently. At least new paying users is ripping. Top of funnel is ripping. And then because new visitors are ripping, we saw a slight decline in our visitor to trial sign up. Direct traffic is up. Organic search is up 40%. So this is back to SEO and all this, the content stuff. Our email marketing is up 975%. And that's purely because we took the blog and we attached an email newsletter mechanism to it. Social media is up 20%. Third-party reviews are starting to pay. I mean, it's just everything's green for the most part.
Yep.
And so I think we should feel really good. And this is, again, just about associating inputs and work with outputs and outcome. And it's like, yeah, it's like, so what did you guys do? We spent a ton of energy enabling our ambassadors. We spent a ton of energy, or not a ton of energy, but we got to a place where the ambassador thing was, streamlined. And then we
Yep.
invested in a high operating leverage model for content and audience, which is basically creating hyper relevant content and then using tooling to repurpose it and distribute it across the world. And then we got more leverage from the blog by pivoting it into an email newsletter that consolidates
Yep.
the best of the articles and getting
Fully
more touch
branded.
time, getting touch time in the inbox. And then it's like, okay, well, how did it do? And it's like, double digit green shit everywhere.
Yeah, basically, even organic search is up. Like, dude,
Yeah.
and with the SEO strategy for the pages getting indexed,
Yeah. So
so
I think
much.
all good stuff there.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, cool. So, and I touched on all this. Just to put some numbers to it. So, new visitor sessions, we've got about a 3% month over month structural incline. Trial signups, we've got a 10% month over month structural incline. Trailing 12 month is 4.9%, which is, as I noted, is absolutely atrocious. And then we've got 17% in the last 30, which is right about base rate, which is probably as good as we'll want to do there. And then churn, we actually improved it we almost halved it, which is crazy. And this is just back to all the lift on the support side, documenting things, the stuff we're doing with a support bot GPT, using the Pixify support GPT internally to make better use of tribal knowledge as a function of documenting everything. And that's something that I want to really touch on with Y1, but it's like, with all the models right now. And if you're asking yourself, how do I get leverage from inference models, large language models, ChatGPT, it's all the same thing. It is a very distinct component of AI. So be very careful when you're like, we're using AI. It's like, well, what does that mean? For us, it was like, how do we feed a bot information? It's like, if you don't have your data in order, you're screwed. So it's like, all right, the first thing we need to do is document and modernize the knowledge base, how to content, whatever. And yes, we're doing it for our users, but we're mostly doing it for a machine that can ingest all that knowledge and then spit it out to us internally to overcome ramp time when we're getting acquainted with the business, to enable 0 to 1 for our support team. And then eventually you release that into the wild and you give it to your customers directly.
But before we go there, after the knowledge base, that was number one. Number two was our ticketing system. We refined our ticketing system to better categorize and classify the conversations that are happening so we can then, every time a ticket is solved, load that information up onto a server and have the bot learn that information as well. So now it's giving you a human response as though it's mimicking a support agent applying to a ticket. And then it's also sending you the most relevant link to the knowledge base article. So having your ticketing system and your knowledge base properly documented with your information properly classified makes it so much easier to train generative AI to then start to assist the users on a 24/7 basis. Now that's what we call a proper operating model.
Totally. And that you just figured, the days of a human touching tier 1 and tier 2 support tickets should be gone.
Yeah, 100%.
And
I was gonna go back to the outbound piece on the growth because we said, UI1 trailing 12-month trial to pay conversion is 4%, but then we saw the 17% in the last 30 days. What have you been doing the last 30 days besides fixated on growth, baby? Outbound and content indexing.
Yeah, totally. Thank God. All right, OKRs. Let's jump in and we'll try to blow through this because I probably want to spend more time on kind of the Y1 achievements and learning, and then of course Y1 goal execution. This is going to be probably a long one. Are you good to hang for like another 20?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, beautiful. All right, so Objective 1 was a 50% increase in blog content and social post volume to uncover impact to new site visitors. So this was basically like, if we do 50% more, will we see a linear or a correlated improvement in our site traffic? And that was like probably impossible to do that in one kind of quarter. So it was like, let's just kind of set the foundation. Let's hit it hard and then let's see where we land and then let's monitor it. And then let's maintain that velocity and monitor the outcomes in the second or the subsequent quarter. So we created a backlog of SEO optimized blog titles based on Ahrefs keyword research and inference LLM model recommendations. So you find the stuff that's most interesting, the long tail keywords. You have a conversation with ChatGPT about the questions in your category that nobody's answered, about the pain points, about trends and what that means for technology. And then you have your headline blog post titles. Then you get in and you create 50x long form posts via whatever tooling is available to you. And then you establish, and for us, we wanted to establish an independent brand for the blog. So I think that was a big moment of realization for me. And I've known it for so long. Like once upon a time, it was like, it's impossible to sell ADP, which is payroll, to sexy growth stage companies because they think we are like the gray haired incumbent. Cool. Let's start this thing called Scaling NYC. That's a content hub of experts that are scaling companies. And then, oh, by the way, if they want to buy ADP, that's great. So it was like, you have to distance the content and the thought leadership from the brand and get the audience to contribute such that it's not, because we just perceive immediately, it's like, oh, this is a brand by Pepsi. I'm not reading that shit. You know, like they're going to just try to sell Pepsi. Like that's not making no sense. So
the way I like to say it is distance the thought leadership, like the true authenticity from the sales pitch, because that people can see through that a mile away.
Like we're so conditioned as consumers. It's like, this is an ad. This is an ad. This is like, get away from me. Get away from me. So we established an independent brand, and then we attached a newsletter or established newsletter mechanism and subscriber sign up onboarding. And then we wanted, as noted, increase our social post volume, which is a function of basically repurposing and distributing the blog. And then we wanted to analyze results and see where we landed. So we gave ourselves 4 out of 4 stars here. The diagnosis was, bottom line, we ripped all the key results in the timeline. And I think these key results are shit. They could have been more result oriented and we should have had 3. Like I assure you, please, anyone who's listening to this, hold us accountable. When I ship the next OKRs, if there's task oriented things in there, just be like, you're an idiot. These key results are sloppy. So, and then we'll keep it moving. So too early to be confident in business impact, right? But I think we, as noted, we've got some really strong kind of early results there. And the bottom line is that our content and audience operating system is stamped, and holy shit, is it high leverage. It is kitted out to the gills. It is like the most high leverage thing I've ever seen in my life. So I'm really thrilled about that. And then moving forward, we just want to be more consistent. I think up until this point, we were working very bursty, where it was like 50 blog posts, 50 blog posts. And it's like, well, why don't you just, and obviously we wanted to kind of get a jump on SEO, but now it's like, let's get into a more steady kind of consistent drip. Anything 100%. To add there?
I would say when you're getting started, it's not always recommended, but I'm a fan of SEO hacking techniques, whether it's, pulling articles from other places that have the highest ranking long-tailed keywords, or just doing a few blasts like we did in the beginning. You want to get yourself a place where you can quickly get indexed. That's really the name of the game. And then you can transition to a nice natural cadence. But you want to get indexed as fast as possible. And then as soon as you get indexed, you can start putting out higher quality content at a slower pace, because now you're being seen. So you're going to get ranked for how consistently you're putting out that content.
Yeah. So the way, and I'm just going to try this by way of metaphor, like, because everyone's like, well, there's interlinking and backlinking and pillar content and bing to bing bing. It's like search engines find that heaviest planets on the internet, right? And so it's your job to start with a little moon and then slap mass on it, slap mass on it, slap mass on it, slap mass on it, and just make it so dense that the search engines are like, oh shit, there's a new Jupiter over here, and that's how it works. So
I love that.
Right? It's like, just think of it as simple as that. Like, we need a thing that's dense as shit, that's interconnected, because we wanted people to believe that we know what we're talking about. And that's what backlinking is. If you have authority, then other people are going to link to your shit. So search engines reward that. And then we want to prove that our breadth of knowledge on this topic is insane. So it's like, barbecue equipment on sunny days, barbecue equipment on rainy days, barbecue equipment if you have toddlers, barbecue equipment on the go. And it's like, cool. And then make sure
what is barbecue equipment?
They're like, these people know about barbecue equipment. Let's serve up their shit.
There you go. No, I love that metaphor. It's exactly how the earth was formed, just spinning around a star for billions of years. And then it's like,
just slap mass on it. Just slap mass on it.
So that's it.
All right. Objective 2, implement a segment-based and product-native onboarding experience to set the foundation for improved trial to paid conversions. And at that point, our trailing 30 was 7.41%. And we missed pretty hard on this. I think what this should have been was outline steps and mock up the UX to then kind of shape or get it to engineering and then kind of be like, all right, what's the cost here? Let's get the work fully shaped, AKA there's engineering estimates in this, and there's kind of an understanding of the technical hurdles. And then let's decide on our appetite for it. And then let's pull it into the OKRs. So for us, I mean, I think the things, and we gave ourselves 2 out of 4 stars. And I think, all right, here were the key results. Create an onboarding experience flowchart. And this was really cross-functional collaboration. So we worked with customer success, whereas our deepest product knowledge is what are the least amount of steps humanly involved to get to this outcome. And we have 4 outcomes that we know are the most important for our users. Cool, that's stamped. We did that for each outcome. What's the minimum amount of steps that are kind of necessary evils to get a user even to a place where they can achieve their outcome? What does every user have to go through? So you just try to get literally like, how do we get this person into the kitchen with a bite of steak in their mouth as fast as humanly possible? So we did that, and then we built onboarding wireframes, which is to complete initial onboarding wireframes with the design team, ensuring the substance of each onboarding step is generally mapped to the user experience and functionality requirements. And then we associated dates, and then we got into execute engineering. And so I wanted to be very iterative with this. And it was kind of like hey, let's get through as many onboarding steps as we can, which would be like general all users, the first outcome, the second outcome, the third outcome, the wrap up for all users. And we got through the first thing that's generally, but we got into some of the steps, and engineering looked at it and they're like, dude, this is like a month's worth of work. And I was like, oh man, all right. So
yeah, there goes that product roadmap conversation.
And I was just trying to push the pace because the onboarding is going to be a huge unlock for not only us, but for our whole category. And it's something that we can use. It's just the cheat code for SMB SaaS, for user-led growth. If you get really ninja, go ahead.
I was going to say, especially as the space is becoming more commoditized, when someone fills out a form and tells you their exact job to be done, the soonest you can get them there with the cleanest onboarding, that's going to unlock the biggest leverage. Even if, let's say, for example, we're acquirers, right? At some point, we have to flip this thing for double to triple the value. That's going to be a huge unlock, even at a strategic play for maybe another competitor in the space. So I think our approach is very thoughtful. However, it's just, we're trying to do too much. It's too fast.
Yeah, exactly. And as Bruce Lee says, mastery is an act of reduction, not subtraction, or not addition.
Or as Kale loves to tell me, focus creates a space for performance.
Amen, dude. Tattoo that on my forehead. All right. So I think the work was not sufficiently shaped, as I mentioned. Anytime something is included in a time-bound OKR that touches engineering, we need thoughtful eyes on it, legitimate estimate. We need to invest in the time to estimate that work. It was really strong validation of what we call our atomic operating unit. So it was like, boom, customer support, design, engineering to a degree. There were smooth handoffs. And I say that it was validation because we did get through some onboarding steps that were totally ninja, as I mentioned. And I guess we can wrap with this in terms of moving forward. No product or onboarding initiative can be included as an OKR if the work isn't fully shaped, aka user flow, UX, and in italics and bolds and with a lightning bolt through it. Engineering estimate, for Christ's sake. So,
do not try to fit your product roadmap into an OKR.
Yeah, God, or an onboarding is a product activity. Full stop. It's a product roadmap exercise. Full stop.
Full stop.
All right. Maintain product release momentum. We won't spend too much time here. We wanted to release brand settings, which was our thing, by March 31st. We wanted to follow the product release playbook for all. We wanted to maintain 80% approval for all. We've got 4 out of 5 stars. And I think the good news is very solid satisfaction and engagement. We've seen generally like a 10% increase in adoption across features, with no major blowback. We did miss a little bit on the scheduling, as I spoke about. So we needed more rigor around product usage data in the roadmap exercise, because we would have sequenced the release a little bit differently. And then we needed a little bit more slack. I thought we could get a lot of this kind of phased release done in like a 2-week period. It needs to be 4 weeks. And so we need to kind of, just more slack in the release timelines that we share with our users. Simple as that.
Yeah. To be fair to us, we are learning to be product managers in our own right with this acquisition. And again, it's been a massive learning opportunity. I don't want to use that as an excuse as to why we missed the schedule. We won't make this mistake again, but it was still a lot to realize, hey, we're going to have to get really strategic about how we manage our product roadmaps outside of the overall operating OKRs, and then find a happy medium to combine the two, whether it's, some tasks that we can handle that's entirely separate from engineering, like surveying users, and then let just engineering flow as they're focused on the product roadmap.
Yep. Okay. So we've got, okay, cool. So we're going to buzz. I've got a hard stop in 7. So, warm up cold outbound capabilities are established in warm up cold outbound capabilities. The key results were manually craft outbound campaigns to existing users, analyze the last 10x paid users for firmographics, segment, and product usage, identify 3 attributes to inform segment prioritization. So it's like, let's look at our last 10 paid users. What is common about these users? Is it how big they are? Is it how much revenue they generate? Is it their pain points? Is it their reputation online? Is it the services that they provide? You find those patterns, and then you're like, okay, this is the segment we need to go after because that's where we're having the most productivity. From there, it was finalized personalization inputs, substance, and optimized channels. So this is like, cool, we can personalize based on this thing over here. Their LinkedIn profile has this thing, all of them, and that's what makes it sexy, and we can use that. This review website has this thing that they have, et cetera. And oh, it looks like they're super active on Facebook. They're posting on the last 10 posts daily. None of them are on LinkedIn. Right. So you kind of get to that point where you're like, okay, this is where we can personalize stuff. And these are the channels where we should hit hardest. And then we want to finalize lead sourcing and enrichment method, which is like, how are we going to get that data in the most efficient way possible? Execute a limited campaign, which is, ballpark 300 leads over 4 weeks. And the intent here is to start warming up the domains and then start to get to a full campaign, which is 1,000 leads through it, and start to establish base rate trial sign-up conversions. And then obviously from that, we want to start to outline kind of what that playbook looks like in terms of knitting together the tech stack, et cetera. We gave ourselves, and actually, let me just email this dude real quick. Anything to add there, Kev?
Yeah, I would say overall, the learning aspect here for us, or at least primarily for me, it's the reason why it wouldn't be like a bang job on this OKR was because, again, we just tried to accomplish too much within it. And the OKR should have been more focused around just establishing the foundation for generating more new quality users with our outbound efforts, and focus more on like warming up the domains, refining the ICP, finding better sources to get more leads and source these leads as we decide to scale for the 1,000+ week over week. So now as we focus on the growth lever, pulling that growth lever, again, just being fair to ourselves and saying, hey, it's going to take time to first establish the foundation against our assumptions, test, review what we've learned from the data that have come in, from the people that have come through that funnel, and then find ways to now scale this with the right folks and the right strategies.
100%. So way too many key results. None of them were framed around key results. One key result, it could have been like execute limited campaign, execute full campaign. Like it's like, and I was like, we were like, well, do we use this for automation, and should we use this for leads and enrichment? Yeah. And how are we going to scrape and bing, bing, bing? It's like, just do it by hand, dude. Do it by hand. Just copy and paste the lead data into a spreadsheet, write the emails, send them. Right. And it's like, and then as a function, and then once you get beyond that, then it's like, cool, we can automate the shit out of this. This is our best source. This is how we can get the data from there, et cetera, et cetera. So, and these are patterns because this is back to the practice, right? And it's like, it's like, oh, I need to remind myself that my form needs to be a little bit better, or like my form still could be improved when I squat. And then you're like, okay, and then you own it all of a sudden, and it's like, all right, my form's starting to slip. So this is back to, and so much of our edge is around systems and automation and data driven everything. So we obviously index in that direction. And so it's constantly like a, reminder, slow down, do manual shit that you despise. And then let's, go from there.
Yep.
All right. Moving forward, I was like, put the pedal to the metal, slam the gas, turn the dial to 10. Like, I didn't know. I was like, just hit this as hard as humanly possible is what we will be doing.
From the beginning.
All right. That's a wrap on kind of the reflection and diagnosis. Let's move into strategic planning. So this is just kind of a headline of what our OKRs are for Q2. We've got objective 1, acquire 10x paid users via cold outbound. Objective 2, release the modernized onboarding experience and achieve a trial user completion rate of 75%. Objective 3 is to release the chatbot beta. And this is obviously an inference-based model to further, that's kind of underpinned by a chatbot to further reduce operational burden. That's that. Much more to come there.
Hold on. As we go through this conversation and we're being, honest with ourselves, objective 2, scrap the second half. We're going to release the onboarding experience and see what happens.
Yeah, but I do want to keep us accountable. Like, I want whoever touches it to do it. or at
Let's
least
see.
I want 3 out of 4 people who touch it to complete it. And we should have this in the wild where we can say at least for 4 or 5 humans that have gone through it that they
Yeah.
completed it or didn't. So we
Okay.
can take that offline. I see where you're coming from.
Let's take it
But
offline. Let's look at the time in which we're releasing it and the time to wrap in the OKR, and then let's take it offline.
I think that's fair. And we need an engineering estimate, which is obviously the key result number one for that. And then to your point, and then we can back into it because that might be too optimistic. Where it's like, well, if we release it on July 1st, we're not going to be able to observe a completion rate because the quarter's over. So totally
Exactly. So the quarter may just be releasing it because again, this goes back to the product roadmap. Let's just focus on getting things in the wild, see what happens.
All right, Y1, year 1, baby. God, it feels like 5 years, honestly. Like the amount of shit that occurred is insane. So I think we can have a dialogue around this. I hate to read off a screen, but our main achievements, bottom line is we executed all the transformation activities. We got them done. There's still some residual around product stuff, but for the most part, everything's done. We established totally repeatable playbooks and operating systems. And we had a lot of these playbooks at our disposal, but we had to fine tune them for the micro SaaS context. And most importantly, we've got a scalable transformation team totally assembled. So coming into this, I didn't have engineering resources. We loosely had design resources. We've got the SWAT team bolted together and they're all like, dude, I am down for at least 2 more companies. Let's go. And so I'm feeling really good there. And I guess just to walk through these, brand and website refresh, a completely centralized and consolidated tech stack across users, product, billing, customer success, blah, blah, blah. It goes on. And then we've got real-time performance analytics. This is all KLU, the Wiz special. We've got an ambassador operating system, which is how to enable, engage, incentivize, all that stuff for your ambassadors. We've got a content and audience operating system, which I already touched on. And we've got cold outbound OS, at least in terms of tech stack and tooling, and sequencing as well, totally rep. And I threw this one in there just because I think there was so much rigor for us around like scorecard based everything. Yes. You want to buy a thing, make a scorecard for it and add what you need and run all the vendors through it. You want to hire a consultant, make a scorecard for the thing, run everybody through it. And so we established that for strategic investment decision-making. And we did such at a level of abstraction where we can apply it to product, we can apply it to hiring, we can apply it to anything. So I was just proud of that because I think it introduced a lot of objective rigor. Okay. Established stable, high quality revenue MRR and absolutely world-class retention. So I touched on that one. And that's what it is. And I think that's probably the most quantifiable where it's like, boom, up and to the right, revenue's durable as shit and SaaS to the bone. Happy days. That's all valuation. We've got positive quarter over quarter trend lines across all performance metrics. New site visitors, trial signups, and new paying users, support ticket volume, response and resolution time. Bang, 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 bang. We've achieved predictable engineering velocity with 80% user approval for all releases. And we've most importantly radically reduced the risk profile of the business. So when we hold the business forever, it's easier to move. If we sell the business, we don't need somebody who's like, oh, I don't have the engineering chops to navigate any of this chaos. It's like we did, here it is. And we fixed all the weird shit. The plumbing's fixed. We normalized all pricing plans and generated $200K free cash flow via an annual subscription plan. And then I guess this is kind of a derivative of the operating system stuff and the playbooks, but we established 2x always on acquisition channels in our ambassador program and our content and audience stuff. I miss anything, dude? I tried to keep it as punchy and meaningful as possible.
No, it sounds like 5 years worth of work. You didn't miss a thing.
Yeah, all right, word up. Key learning. Net new MRR goals start when the transformation period ends. Wow, that's really innovative thinking there. That's a club banger. Oh boy, put your mouth guards in. Okay. Priority number 1 is establishing centralized real-time visibility across the business. I think for us, and there's some chicken or the egg here where it's like, how do we treat a tech stack migration? I think the first thing is like, we need to get to a place where we have one dashboard and we can see everything. And we need to get to a place where everything is piped into Slack. So we know exactly what's happening. A support ticket hits, boom. Somebody churns, great. Somebody signs up for a trial, great. Boom, bing, 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 bing. And we're looking at one place because that is the definition of operating leverage. We're not moving across systems and different shit to try and figure it out. It's like, boom, this is how the business is buzzing. And I feel like we were a little late.
And to add to that, for the entire year that we've been recording these content sessions, we've always shown on our analytics in data box where it all gets ported into. So that goes to show for consistency.
Totally. But I think a big blind spot for us was the Facebook group. And it was like, oh God, is some chaotic thing occurring? I'm going to go check. And that's just some weird shit that looms over you and is a distraction and hinders performance. And so that's another thing where it's like, where do our customers live and where are they talking and doing stuff? I want to see it. And I don't want to go there to see it. I want it to come to me when it occurs. And that's all testament to your work. Just absolutely elite stuff, Kev. Always start with the cheapest growth tactic available. I know that sounds obvious again when we say it out loud. Everything sounds obvious after you've gone through the pain of learning it. Worst case, you'll harvest super useful data. Moving on, assume pricing and monetization is a powerful lever. Micro SaaS founders and sellers generally lack commercial expertise. So it's like, hey, how'd you come up with pricing? They're like, well, we asked them if they'd pay $30 and they said, yeah. It's like, all right, maybe something we can do there. Content creation and distribution is one of the largest points of operating leverage available today. The generative AI revolution hit us right between the eyes, and I thank God every day.
Content is king.
Heavily incentivize and enable your biggest fans out of the gate. They're already working for you. Make it easier for them. Sweeten the pot, and it's already working. Here, hey, human that's already doing work on our behalf because you love what we're doing. How about you get paid a little bit? And here's some social media templates, and here's all this other cool shit. Okay, great, cool. Have a nice day. Onboarding is your sales process in SMB SaaS. So think of it that way. It's got to be dialed. Onboarding, and also I guess as an extension, onboarding is a product-based activity. In-app guides are just Band-Aids. Tech debt must be understood on a relative spectrum measured via drag on your growth thesis. So if there's tech debt, who cares? Unless it's yielding churn or it's going to prevent you from growing. And so you need to understand, hey, and for us now, we have a relative point of view because we have a portfolio company. It's like, this thing was here and this is what it did for our timeline to get to growth. It can be as simple as that. And it's like this thing. So that means we're not buying anything that has more tech debt than that. This is now the floor, and we can understand tech debt on a relative spectrum. So that's a huge unlock for us. And obviously just relative thinking is a function of experience. And we've earned that now. And I'm super grateful for that.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I appreciate that.
All right, we'll jam on Y1. Goal execution. Yellow was close, red was atrocious, and green was great. So this scorecard should summarize a lot of the stuff that we've talked through, right? So total revenue, 95%. And again, pricing and monetization saved the day, but these revenue targets, just the same, were based on, like 12% year over year growth, which is median for, venture-backed SaaS in early days. So it's like, okay, we could have been maybe a little more conservative or adjusted the timelines for those growth goals. But the bottom line is we were in total striking distance. Ending revenue, total striking distance. Month over month revenue growth, not great. And that's because like the critical mass like on average, it's not that great. The pricing and monetization improvement lifted the total. But that's only a few outliers that pull that average up. Generally, that average is below where you want it to be. So not great. Total MRR, again, it's kind of funny. We landed at 97%. And I'm like, all right, shit. It's like, okay, not like, And then the other thing too is if we got in and we were like 120%, it's like your goals aren't lofty enough. So I think when I look at these, I guess I'm like, these goals were maybe kind of perfect, honestly. Like, it's like they were stretched to the extent where, we fell 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% short, but it was still very meaningful and still kind of track record defining. So anyway, and then moving on to total MRR, we looked at total MRR, monthly month over month MRR growth, not great. We were shooting for 0.63%. We landed at negative 0.13%. And again, this is an average. And then we basically had $0 achievement on our dollar growth, MRR wise, and total month over month MRR growth, 0%. So we did not effectively organically grow the business. with net new users. And that is a function of the transformation period. And that is a function probably of not as great goal setting as possibly could have been. And then so that comes the question, like, are you going to adjust your Y2 goals? And the answer is no. So we are going to make up and achieve our goals in Y2 because we've got the spring coiled, and we've basically positioned ourselves to do that by getting stuff done in the tail end of Y1. Anything to add there, Kev? That was a mouthful.
Nothing to add there besides we're going to start seeing a lot of that, a lot of the tailwinds from a lot of the work we did last year start to kick up this year with new user acquisition.
Totally. So I think this is kind of where we're at. And I mean, generally I'm like, we've got a clear line of sight toward achieving our Y2 goals, and we're going to pivot towards, let's look at Y2 goals and we can talk about it. So I'll blow this up a little bit. So we want to do 288K in trailing 12-month revenue, which is like a 20%, or I guess it's like 25, 30% cumulative growth from where we're at now. And again, these percentages are based on kind of where we hit. So I will make that adjustment. I'll look at kind of on a relative basis, what does this look like from where we started? But we want to land at 288K in trailing 12-month revenue. We want to land at 26.7K in MRR. We want to grow MRR on average month over month by 1.81%, which adds up pretty quickly to 20, 30%. We want to keep churn below 1.81%, where this was a function where I inflated churn as a function of user growth. So we'll probably be more intense with our churn goal and probably adjust this down to 1.5. We want persona/ICP based onboarding. We want 1x predictable acquisition channel. We want to pay out our first dividend, which will be 50% of net income. And we want a full transition to steady state operating model and cost, operating team and cost model. What do you think, buddy?
I'm excited about that dividend distribution. We finally get to pay it back. Like we finally get to the point of paying it back to your stakeholders who believed in the vision. Happy days. That should be every entrepreneur's goal. There were people who believed in you for that acquisition. You want to pay it back.
100%. 100%. So I'll adjust kind of these percentages based on the targets. And let's giddy up, dude.
Yeah.
Okay,
no,
Lou.
Very good stuff, man. Good stuff.
An hour-long club banger. Obviously a pleasure to share the field of battle with you, my friend. I am just, I'm so pumped for the future. Honestly, I am so pumped for acquisition number 2, which is happening this year, God willing, the stars willing, the SaaS gods willing. And we're just going to tear it up, dude. So I think patient 0, Y1, us doing this, all that stuff is in the rear view now, and we're bigger, better, meaner, faster. And so I think the future's bright, man. I think 100%. We can try wrap with that. Yep, laser beams. Let's get some laser beams. Oh, all right, buddy. For the love of the game, I'll see you next week.
Love of the game.
You're going to be on a cruise next week. I'll ride Dolo.
Oh, yes. So you're going to do this by yourself, and then following week, you guys will see me back here.
Beautiful. All right, player. Enjoy your trip, man.